Hi, I'm Vaughn Palmer here in the BC Legislature Chamber with my colleague Rob Shaw, and if you look on the Legislature website, Rob, you will see that there was an option for the Legislature to sit this past week. It did not do so. The government chose not to call a fall session of the House. Officially, the Liberals are in their ridings. Unofficially, they're working on re-election. And the last thing the government wants is a bunch of rude New Democrats standing there behind us asking questions. So that's why there's no fall session. There are still things happening in BC. One of our watchdogs reported this week with a good report.
Yeah, it was the Auditor General came out with a look at all of these IT computer upgrade projects we've been talking about for years, Vaughn. They all seem to go sideways within government. The social welfare computer system, the public health outbreak system, the education report card system. Why do they all go over budget and wrong? The auditor had a few suggestions, Vaughn, kind of track a list of things that people could check off in the future to make sure they go right. But
the common factor, I thought, they're too ambitious. They try to fix everything in the world. They get carried away by their own consultants. The government doesn't have enough in-house expertise. And the best piece of advice the Auditor General gave them, I thought, was break them down small, stop spending so much money on these giant projects. And you also get a sense reading her report of just how big this is, that the government is like $1 billion a year on capital and operating, and she found that isn't even the all-in cost.
No, we don't know the operating cost for a lot of stuff, and only 20% of the total bill on IT projects is within the government ministries where everyone is watching. The rest is out in crown corporations, government agencies. So one of the things government has promised to do here next year, ask all those taxpayer-funded agencies to report back what they're doing on computer projects and whether they're late or over budget.
The Liberals are going to get right on it. They've only been in power for 15 years, so it takes a while to get these things. Something else that happened this week, the country's environment ministers are meeting in Montreal. BC's environment minister, Mary Polak, is there. And the Prime Minister that morning dumped a bit of a surprise on them. He announced the national carbon pricing scheme. Carbon will be priced at $10 per ton of emissions starting in 2018, climbing to $50 a ton, which is big, in 2022. The BC government's feeling kind of smug about that because our price is already $30 a ton, and the rest of the country won't have to start paying that until something like 2020, by which time we'll have been paying it already for 8 years.
It takes the heat off both parties, actually. The carbon tax, whether to raise the carbon tax becomes less of an issue in the election. Yep. It's been a troublesome issue for both parties. The Liberals had to campaign on a freeze. The NDP famously campaigned on axe the tax a couple of elections ago, and now would have to stake out a better carbon tax position. So in one sense, it takes the issue off the table. BC was not surprised. We talked about how the LNG, the Pacific Northwest LNG approval from the feds, seemed to have an unspoken agreement with BC that they'd sign on to the carbon plan. So they must have seen it coming.
The only real big issue for British Columbia is, will there be some kind of a national adjudicator to decide whether the price is fair here and compare it to other places, because some provinces are not going to a carbon tax. They're going to cap and trade, which is a scheme for hiding what you're actually paying. And anyway, so they need an independent adjudicator. The other thing that happened, and this is something to sort of wrap up on, look ahead, the government of Alberta said they can only go along with carbon pricing if the federal government approves a pipeline. That probably means a pipeline through British Columbia. That means there's a controversy coming on that before the end of the year. And Rob, you should tell people about naked Norm Letnick, British Columbia's Minister of Agriculture.
Yeah, most of the time when a cabinet minister takes his or her clothes off, they usually have to resign right afterwards.
Well, especially in public.
Yeah, that's right. But this time, Norm Letnick, the agriculture minister, took off his clothes, painted his body, first shaved and then painted his body, took 3 hours, posed in an apple orchard as an apple tree to raise awareness for an obscure tax credit program. Vaughn, you and I covered the provincial budget. I don't remember the food donation tax credit, and apparently neither do the farmers. So that's why the agriculture minister went out to promote it in this.
Folks watching this, try not to think of other provincial cabinet ministers taking their clothes off to dramatize their ministries. We'll leave it at that till next week.